I was so terrified of talking. It was very cryptic, so people were always a bit like, just ignore him. He's a bit dumb. But the moment I moved, people listened, funnily enough. They didn't see, they listened. And I was like, this is my way of communicating. And yeah, that happened when I was very young. Hello and welcome to Move to Live, with me, Akram Khan, brought to you by our friends at Marquee TV, the streaming platform taking breathtaking performances from across the arts right onto your screen. I'm a dancer, choreographer, and director, and I've been moving all my life. I guess anyone could say that, we all move, but I've made movement into my life and work. Dancing, creating dance moves, directing other people's bodies. I am hyper aware of how movement affects everything we experience, both physically and mentally. In this new series, I'm talking with some incredible guests to discover what movement means to them personally and professionally. But before we meet my guests, and I've got some incredible folks lined up, I thought this first podcast would be a good opportunity for you to get to know a little bit more about me. And the person who's going to extract some of that information is Marquee TV Director of Content, Suannah Simons. So let the extraction begin.
Well, it's very exciting to be here, I have to say, Akram. And I wanted to take you back, really, to the beginning of the idea for this podcast series, because it emerged when we spoke not only about the existing works of yours that we've got on Marquee, Giselle and Creature, to name but two, but you were angry at the time, and you were angry about the diminishing opportunities for young people to do dance and movement in schools and also out of schools. So why are you so passionate about that idea? Because they're not all going to become dancers.
No, but I feel, nothing happens until something moves. That's the bottom line. Movement is everything in life and death. You don't have to become a dancer. That's not what I'm saying. But what I feel is that the dancers, people have to connect with their bodies. They have to connect with movement. If they don't connect with their body, they will never connect with the world outside their body. It is through your body that is the lens. That relationship then determines your relationship to the rest of the world. And so whether you go to the moon or whether you go to another planet, your spirit is going with that body. And so for me as a child, I remember growing up thinking if I didn't have that relationship with my body, I think I would be a very different person. And I've got friends who I'm very close to who, as a child, perhaps neglected that relationship, or their parents neglected to encourage them and support them to do sports or to do something. And it's not that they turned out completely different, but there is a trauma there, a trauma that still stays with them. And they often talk to me about it. Like, I wish I had done sports, even if it's as a hobby. It allows me to express in a way that words cannot ever express in.
But that was what wasn't it? You were, if not a totally silent child, you weren't somebody to whom words were your first language at all.
No, I still don't trust words. I mean, the fact that I'm reading off prompt and stuff, by luck I got into working with Peter Brook in a 9-hour play. God knows how that happened.
Yes, because you were only about 13.
I was 13, yeah, and we did the Mahabharata. But the time that I felt I was expressing myself was when I was actually not delivering the lines. It was when I was actually still, or when I was observing, when I was physically present, and when I could express myself through movement. I blame my aunties and my mother. They forced dance onto me because, they lived through a war. It was 71. I was born in 74. The war of Bangladesh happened in 71. They lived through that horrific experience. And I became a living museum. Because they were like, what do we fight for? We need these experiences to be remembered. Let's teach our children to remember it. So those songs that carry that journey of the war, that songs that carry, the dance that carries the stories of grief and loss and celebration were all kind of instilled into, forcefully, I would say. They didn't ask me. whether I wanted to learn dancing at 3 a.m.
So presumably you found out quite quickly that actually movement was your way, and this dance in particular was your way of communicating.
It was the time where I could make other people still and listen. That's when I realized. Anytime I talked, which was really kind of cryptic, I was so terrified of talking. It was very cryptic, so people were always a bit like, just ignore him. He's a bit dumb. But the moment I moved, people listened, funnily enough. They didn't see, they listened. And I was like, this is my way of communicating. And yeah, that happened when I was very young.
And how aware were you, even at an early age, because you talk about the history of Bangladesh and your parents going, it has to live on. Were you aware then of being a sort of vessel that carried the history of Bangladesh, the traditions, the pain or whatever had happened with you, or was it just always there?
I was not aware, no. Because I hadn't lived yet.
But do you think like that now then? Do you think there's a sort of historical connection back to things that you didn't see but that you're now aware of?
Absolutely. My father passed 2 years ago. That's the moment I realised. That's when I realised that the legacy of the past, and I could trace it. Suddenly, for the first time, I was ready to trace it from the past to the present. When they're there with you, we are very often not present, because we take it for granted. When there's an absence there, when my father passed, the next day I started recollecting all the memories of what they shared with us and how that now traces towards me, and now how I'm going to slowly pass it on to my children.
Did they dance?
I don't know if you can call it dance. I don't know what the hell they do. They move, put it that way. I wouldn't call it dance, as in it's not graceful. They're always taking the mickey. They're always taking the piss. I mean, literally. They're a bit bonkers. We're a bonkers family. And I'm happy that they haven't taken to dance, really. They dance like as a joke, but I'm happy that they don't dance. I just want them to move, that's all. Because if they dance, I'm worried that pressure of your parents, both my wife, their mother and me, are both dancers and quite, reasonably recognised, especially me. And I don't want that to be a burden on them.
So we might talk about that in a moment, but I'm going back to this idea of movement and the importance of movement. During the course of this series, you'll be talking to a lot of people who aren't dancers. And presumably the idea is to find out how, through any sort of movement, something is woken within somebody which introduces them to themselves. Is that being a bit portentous, or is that what you want?
That's what I want. Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious to find out what is their relationship to movement. It doesn't matter what you do. Even the conversation with you is a movement. It's a movement of ideas, thoughts. Movement is life. It's also death, because the body continues to decompose. We're constantly in motion. And for me, I want to understand and kind of explore and learn from people who are in different genres, different fields, of what movement means to them. Because whatever they do, whether they're a scientist, they have to move to work. They have to carry their bodies. Perhaps what they're doing, what they're exploring, is something to do with movement in some form or another. So I'm curious to learn about movement through different lenses, really.
And presumably there will have been a moment in all their lives, you hope, that it was through movement that actually they became a scientist, which sounds a bit tangential. But there is that idea of your ability to move teaches you things that you aren't aware of at the time. It awakens something within a person, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's movement is a combination of awakening of, I always say, the awakening of 5 senses simultaneously. These senses are awoken at the moment you move. And it's perhaps a philosophical approach, but for me, I'm curious to find out at what moment did that happen to them.
And presumably, because as I said at the very beginning of this conversation, you were angry, watching what's happening and people being denied this opportunity to move, watching generations now sitting in front of computers and tablets and on their phones all the time, there must be a worry on your behalf that actually this generation will grow up without developing those senses and that ability.
I mean, I find it terrifying. I see it in my children. That's why I try to keep them outdoors rather than indoors. I know we have terrible weather in this country, but I try to keep them as much outdoors. You know, my son does trampoline, my daughter does jiu-jitsu, and I try to keep them busy with that because the power of technology, the power of the screen, literally enslaves you. I know it because I do it. I do it in the middle of the night. It's the moment I switch off where my body stops and I start looking into a screen. But luckily, dance is my life. So most of the day I'm spending moving. But I remember so many moments where I'm sitting around a dinner table, you know, having dinner with my family. And, you know, I want to converse with them. I want to talk to them. How was your day at school? And my wife is on the iPad. But we're having dinner together. My son's watching the television. My daughter's on the other iPad. And my littlest one, she's 2. She's just messing up my phone. And I'm sitting there observing this and going, we're all present but not. Mm-hmm. Movement provokes you to be present. That's why it's called a present. It's a gift. The moment you stop moving, you're in a different space. You're either in the past or in the future. You are not present.
So when you're talking to your friends, the ones who talk to you about movement, how much can you tell about them by the way they move?
It's about patterns. I've learnt to understand patterns. And that's why I say the body never lies, movement never lies. When they're holding themselves, maybe the fist is a little bit like this. One person is always tapping at a certain point, depending on what subject we're talking about. It reveals everything. And so I'm a keen observer of people. I mean, some people think that's a bit uncomfortable, a bit weird. My wife keeps telling me, I've got my children, I think our children have the worst end because they're Japanese and Bangladeshi. My wife's Japanese, and, the Japanese, I've discovered that they're having a conversation, but actually they're completely acutely listening to other people's conversations. Whereas Bangladeshis, which are my parents, they may not know you, but they're looking into your face and absolutely just watching you and listening to you without even pretending not to look at you. So, I've always been an observer. So sometimes I'm uncomfortably staring at people thinking, and things are forming in my head. First of all, what animal is closest to them? I always do that. I have a tendency to define people with the closest animal because animals are the ones that I trust more than human beings. So one's a bear, or one's a snake, or one's a squirrel. I was just recently said to someone I met, I was like, "Oh, you remind me of squirrel." They go, "Why?" And I was like, "Because you're always in mid sentence, and then you suddenly realized that you're late for something." And it's a way that they speak that they never finish the sentence. So it's a bit like a squirrel. It's like they pop their head up, and they're like, "Oh shit, I left my nut somewhere," and they disappear. It's that quality and timing of the way they are. They're like super frantic. So I'm always associating animals with humans. That's the first thing I do. Second of all, I'm really obsessed with studying people when they're not being observed, because when we're being observed, we show ourselves in the way we want to be observed, to be seen. When we're not seen, it's completely different. Looking through so studying people is something very, very important for me, because fundamentally I'm interested to not show dance. I'm using dance as a language.
Because I was going to ask you exactly that. How much of that knowledge of people do you bring into your choreography?
Everything. All of it. When I'm doing a solo on stage, my whole family's on stage with me. I'm never alone. When I need rage, I turn to my father. When I need to tap into wonderment or joy, I turn to my mother. I see my mother in front of me. When I'm a bit on the fence, I see my uncle, one of my uncles or one of my aunties, dodgy ones, right? And so when I'm completely confused or frustrated, I see my sister, right? So they're always on stage with me. And what I try to do when I'm working with dancers is to bring they don't have to tell me, because that's sometimes deep trauma, but they have to find the pleasure or the courage, if you like, to bring their history or her story, not his story, her story, their story onto the stage, because that's your truth. You've lived that.
You're beginning to choreograph a piece. You have an idea. When you cast it, do you think back and think, well, I know these people, I know she can do this and he can do that, and bring them together a bit like putting together a cake or a recipe where you know what the ingredients are before you even start and you know you've got the right combination of people? Or do you hope, conversely, that you'll bring people in and find something new in the course of the creative process?
So I often call it the pleasure of drowning. You have to find the pleasure in drowning. So my setup is, I've done a huge amount of research, but the moment I walk in, I just abandon everything, knowing that I will find that research useful at some point. I've become very good at bullshitting to people that I know what I'm talking about. I convince my dancers I've done my homework. And I have to a certain degree, but to be honest with you, I didn't prepare that morning or the night before of how I will start, how I will take that first step. So it's really devised. It's really about instinct. And I'm literally following my senses and feeling where to go and how to go. It's like discovering a child. You can't tell the child what to be. The child will be what the child will be. The child will even speak back to you at some point as a teenager and say, sorry, this is who I need to experience this for myself. And creating a work is very similar to that. Because at the end, when they've grown up and gone through the hormonal stage, eventually they come back around to you. And the premiere for me is when they've come back around to you and you understand and they understand and there's a connection. But really in that early stage of creation, I love the fact that anything is possible right now. But I do act like I'm in charge. Meaning that I've got it together. And inside of me, I'm going, they have no clue that I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Which is such a beautiful space to be in, because we live in a world where we feel like we need certainty. We are so dependent on this untruth, this unrealness. I always say to my children, tomorrow I could die just by walking on the street, right? You don't know. We're not in control of death. We know it's going to happen, but the one thing we do know is that we're not in control of when that will happen. So for me, it's really, really important that we live every moment and discover that moment. It's important to discover it. If you know it, then don't do it. You stop being an artist.
You've called this series Move to Live, obviously because you believe, as we've discovered, that the two are inseparable, that you can't live properly and live a fulfilled life without movement. But a lot of the guests won't be dancers. Is the hope and expectation that Move to Live will strike a chord with them, that you'll discover what it is about that combination in them that makes them who they are?
Absolutely. I'm so excited to discover what movement means to them. Movement is in the DNA of everyone. We just deal with it differently. What I want to understand is what kind of movement helps them to live.
So given that you're so passionate about this, if somebody waved a wand and said, right, how are you going to change things now, what would you do?
I would probably put dance into, or movement, some form of movement, whether it's a martial arts or something, into the education system of every child, for every child. Not, I grew up doing dance classes there was dance at least once a week in school. I even attended dance competitions, talent competitions at school. I won a disco competition to Michael Jackson and Five Star. It changed my relationship with people, the way they saw me, the way I saw them. I can just go on and on about how important it is, or how detrimental it is if we continue the path that we're continuing, where we're stopping, where we're taking away the education of movement.
It's worse than that. I'm going to tell you something which I think is profoundly shocking, which is that there are quite a lot of schools in this country which had sprung floors put in order when they were built for dance to take place in those schools. And now they're often used for exams or detention, precisely because they're quiet spaces and that sprung floor helps get rid of noise. But what they're not used for is dance.
It's unbelievable, really, and tragic.
So you would change all that, given half a chance?
Absolutely. The other thing that I feel is, for me, dance has this is an amazing vessel to be fluid. And I mean be fluid and comfortable in your gender. And I mean, I trained in Indian classical dance, so I played female characters, male characters. There was always this fluidity. Of course, at school, there is movement, like in rugby and football, but it was always, the men did football or rugby, and dance was meant for female girls. But for me, dance transcended gender, I would say, definition. It was ethereal. It was neither her nor him. It was everything. And I feel that kind of confidence to give to someone is super important as a child.
Are you going to turn into a lobbyist, do you think? Are you going to go and rail at our politicians? Or do you hope a series like this will actually begin that conversation?
I wish they would listen to it. A series like this. I think they're not truly listening. I think we've lost the art of listening as a generation of politicians, or maybe that's always been the case. I don't know. We've lost the art of listening. We act like we're listening, but we're not deeply listening. Because if we deeply listened, we would know there's a problem, and we would also know what the solution is. But I think we're living in a world which is very ambiguous and extremely frightening.
I think it's going to be an exciting ride.
Me too. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Move to Live, and do keep an eye out for more episodes here on Marquee TV. And feel free to get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. The email address is movetolivepodcast@gmail.com, or you can get in touch on our socials. You'll find all the links in the show notes. So until the next time, goodbye, and please, always keep moving.